I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Jason Zimmerman, Visual Effects Supervisor on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. In fact, he is the Visual Effects Supervisor for all of the Star Treks at the moment. He's basically the man for all visual effects in the Star Trek world, so I'm very excited to speak to him as a super Trekkie nerd that I am. Jason, first of all, I was immediately engaged with the premise of the show because we're following Captain Pike and the crew of the Starship Enterprise, and it's, we're going back to, that era of the original series. It's so exciting, so much to work with. What most excited you about the concept behind the show?
I think exactly that we were, Star Trek is such a beloved show, the fan base, everything. It's like you're working within a canon of a show that has such an incredible legacy to begin with. So I think, it's always exciting to work on a Star Trek show, but with this, to that point, working with, Captain Pike and kind of going back to the, sort of roots of the original series, the Enterprise again, and, being able to show the Enterprise and play with the Enterprise as a visual effects guy. I mean, that's something I grew up wanting to do. And, when I first started as an artist. And so I think being able to work on Trek is always an honor and a pleasure, but to be able to do something that is, going back to the roots of the legacy of the show, like sort of where things all began, has just been really exciting.
Oh, I can imagine. And actually, thinking of exciting, when we last spoke, we were talking about how incredible and innovative your work on Discovery has been. And then, of course, you won an Emmy for it. So congratulations. Take us back to that night at the Creative Arts Emmys when you actually won.
Oh, yeah. It's even to this day, I think it's a little bit surreal that it actually happened. I being, again, working on Star Trek, and if you go back and look at the legacy of visual effects wins for, Emmys, Star Trek for years got them every year. I mean, and so to have that on your shoulders, and as a team for us to look at that and go, every other Star Trek show has always won, has always sort of been in the back of our mind. And then so when we got into Discovery, it was like right away, well, we gotta do everything we can to just be there, just to get a nomination. And nowadays it's hard just to get a nomination. It's hard to make a TV show. And so I think we were, so happy to be nominated again and just to be at the dance, as they say. And we were very excited about that. And, when they announced the name, there was like this pause where I looked at my team and we all kind of just were sort of incredulous. We couldn't believe that they had just said Star Trek Discovery, And so I think I don't remember much of it. I refused to go back and watch the speech that I gave because I'm certain it was not very good. But I think I got everybody's name in there as far as thank yous. But I mean, it was such an honor to be able to bring Star Trek back to the stage, again, based on the legacy of what they had done for visual effects, and to be able to, to stand on the shoulders of all those guys that came before us, those people that came before us, and it had done such a tremendous job. To be able to be there and bring it back was super exciting. And it's still not, it doesn't quite feel real. Maybe a few years from now it will, but it's crazy for sure.
I can imagine, man. Like, I was so thrilled for you because when we talked about the episode in particular, it was Sukal, which was like, I think the third to last of the season. It was bonkers, the amount of work that went into that. And it was so breathtaking to look at and experience. And I was so happy the Academy actually agreed because, as you say, there is so much content at the moment. And look, think of sci-fi. There's so many amazing sci-fi shows on at the moment that you're competing with. So to be the winner, you will always now be Emmy winner, Jason Zimmerman. So that's cool. But let's see if we can get another one maybe for Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Fingers crossed. We're hoping.
Fingers crossed. So speaking of, I swear to you, this is honest truth. After Discovery, well, I mean, that's still going, but I just figured, I don't know how you can possibly top the work that you did on that show, especially when the season went, 900 years into the future and it was so different. And of course, somehow you managed to do it because in new Star Trek Strange New Worlds, there's more world building, and of course, it's retro futuristic. So I want to talk about that specifically. I think that's the key here. You've had to make something really amazing and futuristic, but go back to the original series aesthetic in some way. So talk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think credit goes to, Akiva Goldsman, Alex Kurtzman, Henry Myers, everybody who sort of set the tone for what the show was going to be. I mean, they had a very, very clear vision for what they wanted things to be, bringing in Jonathan Lee as production designer, everybody kind of knew exactly what they wanted to accomplish. And so I think that starting from the beginning, we had a very clear focus of what things wanted to be. And it was, like every show in Star Trek, it needs to be a little bit different from the other shows. Each show has to have its own personality, and it's sort of its own cinematic style, if you will. And so, right off the bat, we kind of knew that sort of like retro tech version of, Star Trek was what we wanted to do, to sort of differentiate from the other shows. And I think particularly, being able to get in there and, go back to playing with the Enterprise, or like the shuttles from the Enterprise, or just going to some of the planets, or anything that we've sort of seen before, using the technology we have now to sort of do the best version that we know how to, and to sort of at the same time pay homage to, what the originals look like. And so I think, for us, it was very important to make, just beautiful CG imagery and beautiful visual effects and beautiful, cinematic shots that the fans could watch and just enjoy. I mean, I can remember year one on Discovery, when we first came out, I made the mistake of going on the boards, which is a scary place to be sometimes, because the fans are very, very passionate, and they'll tell you if you're doing a good job, and they'll tell you if you're doing a bad job. And one of the things that I noted over and over again was everybody wanted just to see the shots longer and see the beautiful ships and how they kind of looked. And they would always reference the original series and sort of how they presented their shots. And so that was something that we endeavored to do, was sort of go back, look at how the original series presented, establishing shots of ships and all the different things that they did. And then from that space, say, okay, what can we do with the technology we have now to make a better version of that, or a more evolved version of that, but still at the same time, stay true to the spirit of what got us there to begin with, which was the original series.
Yeah. And I love that in the pilot, when Captain Pike is speaking to the crew, we get to see different parts of the ship in detail, particularly engineering, the warp core. And it's something that I've never really seen before. And I figured at this point in time, surely you've run out of ideas, because we've seen it all before. But how do you work with Jonathan Lee, the production designer, and making sure that you're just bringing something new over and over and over again? It seems exhausting to me.
Well, I mean, I think you have to have a lot of conversations and just sort of throw out a lot of ideas. Jonathan is very collaborative, and I think also using the virtual production stage was a great opportunity for this, and also Discovery as well. But I think using the stage, the virtual production of it all, gave us a chance to show things and showcase things in a way that maybe in the past we might not have been able to, just due to time constraints or whatever with visual effects. But being able to generate assets that were camera ready to shoot on the day by the director, kind of opened up a lot of opportunities, not just from engineering, but if it was an on-planet situation or any of those things, we really were able to design those things. And Jonathan and his team came up with so many very cool ideas, and they would come to us and say, here's what we're thinking, how does this sort of fit in with the virtual production technologies? And we'd work with them, and then Pixamondo, the vendor that works with us on that, to kind of come up with the best versions of those things. And I think to your point about engineering, I really am proud of that asset. I think it came together really well, because it does showcase such an incredible scope that I'm not sure you've seen before in the Trek TV shows. It was such large, massive, sort of cavernous spaces, the warp core of it all. Like we haven't seen things quite like that before. And so to be able to showcase that and work with them, and again, credit goes to the crew. Glenn Keenan, our DP, is another one that I've worked with since back on the Sleepy Holidays. I mean, years and years and years. And so, sort of having that shorthand with Glenn and the team, and to be able to kind of work with guys who kind of understand how we think in visual effects and everything, was really helpful. It's very helpful when everybody understands what it takes from a visual effects standpoint. Visual effects understands what it takes from a production standpoint. And so I think everybody working together and sort of trying to come up with something, again, that was a little bit different, using the virtual production and different other techniques, but at the same time, again, going back to that, this is the original Star Trek sort of vibe, and how do we accomplish that? I mean, I think it really shines through in the show.
It really does. Given that you have such good relationships with certain department heads and other people on the show, you have that shorthand. Do you ever find when you need to outsource certain parts of the visual effects, certain parts of it that you have to outsource to various vendors, do you always go back to the same companies and same people, or are you sometimes willing to take a chance with someone who you've not worked before, but you've seen their work on something else and were really impressed by it?
I think it's both. I mean, I'm always open to, meeting new people, new vendors, new techniques, all that sort of thing, because, I came up as a compositor and an artist in visual effects. And at some point someone had to say, well, this guy can, maybe he can do a good shot for us. And so I'm always open to new vendors and everything. I think, it's fun and exciting sometimes to get a different perspective and get somebody who's, maybe coming in with a little less, mileage on the tire, so to speak, with one particular technique or whatever. That being said, we also do have a stable of vendors that we've worked with for years that are like family to us. Ghost is one that comes to mind there in Denmark. Crafty Apes is another one. Obviously, Pixamondo. I mean, these are all guys that, again, I've worked with all of them for probably 15 years, and we all at one point were artists together or supervisors together. We started on Sleepy Hollow together, and so, for me, it's very important to have a not just a shorthand, but I think also there's a bit of a partnership and sort of a family situation where, you get to know these people over the years, and they know you, and they know the show you're working on, and what they're working on, and you root for everybody, whether it's a Star Trek show or somebody you're up against at the Emmys. But I think ultimately, having shorthand with vendors that you've worked with for years and built those relationships, it leads to I think great results, because they're not afraid to take chances creatively. They're excited about the show. They know what you are looking for. So I think it's important to definitely have sort of those go-tos and that sort of that family relationship. But at the same time, I love to meet a new artist. I mean, even if it's somebody who's just starting in the industry, I can't tell you how exciting it is, because a lot of times, I remember what it was like at like 20, getting in there and getting my first job, and how excited I was. And sometimes when you meet people and you see that in their eyes, and you see the excitement and the energy that they bring to it, like sometimes that's exactly what you need. And so I think you need to look everywhere for those things and bring everybody in that's, excited to work on a Star Trek show.
Well, you heard it here first. All the up and coming amazing visual effect artists, if you want to succeed, you've got to impress someone like Jason, and you might get a chance one day.
Happy to talk to anybody, for sure.
Absolutely. The primary remit of the visual effects department and team is the vast amount of CGI work that you have to do. Mm-hmm. So on this show, given the virtual production and the way that this particular show has been put together, is there ever much scope for tactile in-camera effects, or have you found that this is a heavily CGI show?
I actually, scale-wise, I think this is probably a little bit smaller than Discovery, although I think it probably represents a little bit differently in the show. I think in that, that goes back to, I think, the vision that Akiva and Henry and everybody had in terms of how the shots would be presented, which is, very much more cinematic, scopy, old school, type of, effects. They're not as complex as like a Discovery necessarily, but we do a beautiful shot, and we work very, very hard to make that shot look good. So, there may be less shots than like a Discovery, but I also think we spend a lot of time perfecting those shots. You know what I mean? So it's sort of making a less complex but more beautiful, if we can, version of every shot. But there's plenty of in-camera stuff. I mean, we have the teams that we work with up in Toronto. Again, it's a family. We've known a lot of these guys for a long time, and I think once you're in Star Trek, Jonathan Frakes always said this to me, and it's true, which is once you're part of the Star Trek family, you're family for life. And you bump into somebody and they could work on a different show or whatever, and like you immediately have this rapport. And so I think everybody kind of comes to it with that same sort of thought process, which is like, let's make the best Star Trek we can, regardless of if it's Discovery or Picard or, Strange New Worlds or any of those things. And so I think, there's always a desire to do the most beautiful shots you can and make the most beautiful stories that you can, regardless of how that's accomplished. If it needs to be done in CG, we'll do it in CG. But if there's a way to do it practically, we'll do it practically. And I think a lot of times, the best versions of those things are where the practical and the CG, sort of come together. There's what you go as far as you can practically, and then CG will take you the rest of the way. But I think not relying and just going, it's going to be full CG, don't worry about it, but going, what can we do practically? And then how can visual effects tie into that to tell the best story, is always going to get you the best results. And I think this show is a good example of that.
Yeah, I was trying to work out what the main differences would be between Picard, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds. And I guess apart from the retro aesthetic, and what you're saying about it not being as complex and a bit more static, so that it just feels more old school. And I can't really describe it because I'm not a technician or an artist in that way. Would you say that is the main difference when you're working on all three shows and you're looking at them as a visual effects supervisor?
Definitely. I mean, I think, on Discovery, I think we do a lot of very complex things. If you look at the episode that we won the Emmy for, that was a lot of, very technical stuff that we did with the creature and everything. I think part of what sets Strange New Worlds apart from that, and I think there's room for both in terms of the storytelling of it all, but I think the intent with Strange New Worlds was to have these sort of big cinematic, beautiful shots that weren't necessarily as complex, but that you could just live in and look at and sort of really appreciate the ships for what they were. And at the same time, if there's a need for something complex, like, in an episode where, God, I can't think of the name of the Mahadid with the asteroid and the shepherds and all that sort of thing, and the chase and the sort of back and forth, not touching it, but sort of getting it to break apart and sort of changing the trajectory of that comet, that required some complexity, and we did it, but we never overdid it. We just did it to the extent that we needed to tell the story. And that's sort of always how we approached it with our executives was, is this telling the story you want? And sometimes they would give us very specific notes, and sometimes they would just say, that's not it, do it again. And so we would go back and sort of try to take a different approach to it. But I think, ultimately, for us, it does feel like I think the shots are a little bit less complex. They are, in every case, whether it's Discovery or Strange New Worlds or Picard, the point is to tell the story. And if we as visual effects team start to do something that's such a spectacle that you are pulled out of it, or we don't do a good job of it, and all of a sudden you go, that's a blue screen, which I think everybody nowadays is able to identify, then you haven't done your job. And so I think, each show has its own personality. And I think in the case of Strange New Worlds, it was about being a little bit more cinematic. And again, true to the original series, if you look at the way they shot those, and a lot of that, models and miniature stuff was beautiful and still holds up. I think some of that stuff, I still look at some of those shots and think they're as good as anything you'll see on TV today. And so I think that's sort of what we were trying to go for, was let's try and at least pay homage to that. If we can't do it exactly, but do something that kind of reminds the viewer that that's where we come from.
Final two questions. The first one is, I just want to zone in on your favorite shot or sequence. I'll tell you mine first. Episode 4, you got to create or help create the Gorn ships. And I was like blown away, because anyone who loves Trek knows that the more Gorn, the better. And I just couldn't believe what you guys came up with. So that was mine. You can have the same one if you like, but tell me what you were most excited about for season 1.
Actually, that is probably near the top, if not the top of the list for me. Yeah. I mean, being able to create the brown dwarf with the black hole and sort of that whole sequence of cat and mouse ships was a blast. And it's one of those sequences where, when we started to put it together, instantly when I started to see the shots come back from our vendors, Ghost in this case did that, I was like, oh, this is going to be so super fun. And seeing the designs from Jonathan Lee and sort of like the organic nature of the Gorn ships and everything, it was cool, because it's not like anything else you see on TV as far as spaceships or even on Star Trek are concerned. It's a little bit different. And so I think it was just that whole sequence, the sequence of cat and mouse and the Enterprise going towards the thing, and like that was such a blast to play with. But I have to say that's near the top of the list for me. I think that's probably really fun. I think doing the Illyria stuff, oddly enough, some of the set extension work in there was great. I think working on the pilot was fun, just because Akiva directed it, and he has such trust in us, and he's so collaborative and fun to work with. And so to be able to work with him and kind of bring his vision to life and kick off the series, there's something very, very, it's an honor to be able to start strong and to start a new series, and to, doing a season 1 of television is hard, I think, in any show. But to kick it off like that episode kicked it off, and to see the response and how the fans have taken to it, and how, everybody's taken to it, has just been, it's been such a blast. So, I mean, there's been a lot of high points, I think, but, definitely the Gorn ships, and seeing, I knew the minute I saw the script, and I went, oh man, here we go, because that's going to be such a big deal for the fans, and I knew it was going to be something that would be watched and scrutinized, and so we spent a lot of time trying to get it right. So that I would say that one's probably it for me.
Okay, because like when Lan says the Gorn after she hears a little girl clicking, I thought, okay, don't stuff this up. This has got to be breathtaking, and it was. You stuck the landing. It was amazing.
That's all we were trying to do. That's high praise. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, my final point, it's really just a quick statement. You once said to me, and it's stuck with me ever since we spoke, which was probably a year and a half ago, that you're never really done with a shot. You just run out of time. I love that. And I always talk about that with other visual effects supervisors that I speak to, and everyone agrees. So you obviously still feel the same way, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, I don't think I think I'd be working on almost every episode of everything. I think there's always something more to be done. And sometimes you don't think of it until you get certain things out of the way, especially if they're a complex sequence, or if you're like really struggling to get something to that photoreal stage. The minute you get there, you go, oh, I got to do this. And it's like, do you have the time to do it or don't you? I mean, there's always something more to be done. And in addition to that, I'll say another thing, which is you're only as good as your last shot. And so I think, whether it's the Emmys or, the last shot of the last episode of season 1, season 2's coming, and you gotta just keep going and do the best that you can, because, ultimately you're doing something. Star Trek is I think it's either Alex or Akiva said that, Star Trek is as much something that belongs to the fans as it is to the Roddenberrys. I mean, the fans, they are so supportive and so loyal. And so, it is our job to make sure, and like you said, don't mess it up. And so we take it very seriously and we do the best that we can.
Yeah, we can tell. And it's like any artist, any writer, like you eventually just have to let go and just let it go out into the ether. And I'm so glad that you guys did. You killed it. I can't wait for season 2. Congratulations on your Emmy. I hope you get another nomination very shortly. Thanks, mate.
Oh, thanks, man. Much appreciated.